Excellent. Thanks, Megan. And I want to thank everyone for joining us today. I really appreciate, we really appreciate you taking the time out. Everybody's busy to join us in this webinar, and we really hope you're going to find it useful. So there's going to be two of us that are going to be presenting today, and so we want to tell you a little bit about ourselves. I'm Dan Freel, and I've worked in the pharmaceutical industry prior to consulting for a little over 20 years. I started as an analytical chemist. I have quite a bit of laboratory experience. I worked in other areas too, stability for quite a while, and also other different areas of pharmaceutical and biopharma. I've been involved in informatics for definitely over 10 years, mainly LIMS, but the other laboratory systems, CDS, ELN, different systems you'd use in the laboratory. I've been a consultant for the last 5 years. And in addition to the pharma and biotech experience and consulting experience, I've also worked with chemical and petrochemical companies as well. And I do have experience in multiple LIMS systems, both using and as a consultant. And I really never lose focus of those lab processes and the sample workflows. I really still consider myself a laboratory person, and I try to keep that end user laboratory perspective, which I think is really important in the consulting industry. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Adam for him to introduce himself.
Adam, you might have to take yourself off mute.
Hello.
There he is.
My name is Adam Shahrani. I'm very excited to be here today, and I'm very excited that you're all with us. This is a topic that's very dear and near to my heart, as well as my colleagues at CSols. My background is 15 years of software development experience. I've been in regulated industries for 12 years, and I've focused on LIMS for 10 years, mostly LabWare LIMS, and pharmaceutical R&D, manufacturing, biotech, clinical trials, etc. I'm really passionate about LIMS design, development, and best practices. I'm really eager to hear what Dan has to say and try to continue along with that. Back to you.
Excellent. Thanks, Adam. So today's agenda, what we're going to do is we're going to define what we mean by code when we talk about code management. We're going to do that briefly. We're then going to talk about some of the challenges that you'll face with code management or probably have faced. Then we're going to propose some solutions, strategies to these challenges. We're going to summarize this at the end. And as Megan mentioned, we're going to definitely leave some time for questions and answers. So please save your questions till the end, and we'll do our absolute best to try to address those. So let's jump in and let's talk about, define what we mean by code when we're talking about LabWare specific code management. And really, it's kind of general what we're talking about here. It's really all the code that relates to your use in your LabWare system. So either directly in the interface or anytime you're using the system. So when you think of LabWare code, most of the time you're going to think of LIMS Basic. So those of you who have development experience, LIMS Basic is the main code that's used by the LabWare instance. And Adam's going to give us a nice overview on LIMS Basic, where it lives, what it does, that type of thing. I'm going to refer to subroutines. So subroutines are probably the main object in LabWare where most of the LIMS Basic lives. But in addition to the LIMS Basic, it could be that direct database interfacing. So you could have SQL queries where you're, whether you're inputting or outputting information directly from your database. That's quite common. But also any other external languages or scripting languages, command line, JavaScript, which is used now especially in the visual workflows for LabWare. So there's a lot of different languages. So it's really anything that you're currently using in your LIMS instance is what we're talking about managing here today. So we're going to talk about some different challenges, and we broke these up into different areas. Excuse me. So the first four I'm going to handle, and that's managing multiple environments. If you have multiple developers in the same instance, having multiple projects going on at the same time in the same instance, and unused code. So Adam is then going to discuss LIMS Basic, and again, he's going to get much more in depth with that. He's going to talk about bugs and inconsistencies, debuggability, how your code's modifiable, as well as code quality, which is really important for us at CSols. So we're going to help you find these challenges, and more importantly, we're not just going to identify, like I mentioned before, the challenges themselves, but we're really going to try to propose some strategies or solutions that can help you with these. So we really do hope you find these useful as well from our experience. So the first issue I'm going to talk about is managing multiple environments. So it's common practice, and I'm sure all you can relate, that LIMS systems often are undergoing continuous changes. You're trying to meet new system needed functionality, new business requirements, new functionality, trying to improve efficiencies. So we really need or can use multiple environments to ensure that you have a solid production instance. Now your production instance is that official environment you're using in the day-to-day operations, obviously. The development environment could be where you're going to do your prototyping, problem solving, make changes, develop the solutions to meet your business requirements prior to moving in production. It can be really helpful to have a staging instance as well, or a staging environment. And so this could be great. So once you develop your functionality, you can test out moving that code or objects into another environment and see how portable it'll be into your production environment before you do it for real. Now, some people perform their testing in development environments. It probably depends on what type of industry you're in. But for the higher regulated industries, such as pharmaceuticals, you're often going to have a validation or testing environment. And I can't stress enough, wherever you're performing that testing, that instance of all of them need to be representative of production, because that testing's got to mimic how production is going to perform with that same functionality. Some places opt to have, it's definitely optional, but a training environment. And so other than kind of the obvious to train your users in this instance, it could be an excellent place to let your end users become acquainted to the functionality before they're actually using it in the production system. So beyond that formal training, give them some time to work in the system so they're not acquainting themselves in production. So that could be very useful. So you've got these different environments, and that sounds awesome. What could possibly be the problem? Well, the problem is that over time, you'll run into what we're going to call here drift. And drift is really where these environments start to become differentiated from one another. Now, normally this is because you have a difference in the objects or what's in those objects that leads to this drift or differences. And most of the time it's inadvertent. So usually it's because you've moved objects you didn't intend to move to certain environments, or you didn't move objects that you should have moved to certain environments. So this drift can be a real problem. Where it can be a real problem is if wherever you're performing your testing, if that's not representative and it's drifted too far away from your production environment, you could have validation that passes, everything looks awesome. You move that functionality to production and you have bugs and issues, and that's a major problem. Another situation could be where if you're performing your testing in a different environment other than your development environment, you could have your validation fail because some of the assumptions you made were based on objects in the development environment, and that may have drifted too far away from your validation environment. So drift can be a major problem. So let's talk about some of the solutions to solving this drift. Probably one of the most powerful tools in LabWare for controlling the drift is what we call configuration packages. Now, a configuration package gives you a means to group objects or functionality to be able to automatically move all that functionality into different environments via just one package. So you can create a single configuration package, use that to move all your functionality to all the environments. So one package, all the environments. That's going to give you that consistency to make sure that all the objects you're moving are consistent across the environments.